I tell you what, I want to say one thing. If you're not out there pairing bourbon with sweet pastries in the morning, you're making a big mistake, because
it's a new life choice.
This is amazing.
I'm so
really
glad.
is the way to live right here.
Yeah, I'm glad.
I don't know if it's just generally good or you made a great choice, because it tastes wonderful together.
Welcome to another trip down the Bourbon Road with your hosts, Jim and Mike. So grab a glass of your favorite bourbon and kick back.
We would like to thank Tommy and Gwen Mitchell from Logheads Home Center for supporting this episode of the Bourbon Road. Find out more about their fine rustic furniture at logheadshomecenter.com. Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Shannon.
I'm Mike Hyatt.
And this is the Bourbon Road. And today, Mike, where are we?
We're at the Saddlebred Suites in Shelbyville, Kentucky. It's adjoined to the Paddocks Coffee Shop on Main Street, USA, as I like to call it.
And this is a suite of rooms that are kind of positioned right on the Bourbon Trail. Ideal for people who are out touring the Bourbon Trail, have a place to stop. And
well, if you're in Louisville and you want to not stay downtown Louisville and you want to come to something more quaint or stay on the Bourbon Trail, there's no more place beautiful than Shelbyville, Kentucky. I think it's Main Street, USA. Like I said, you've got Frankfort and Lexington about 20 minutes away, Louisville about 30 minutes away, and actually you can get to Bardstown from here in about 35 minutes.
Yeah, that's what you said.
Well, I'm an old country boy. I'm used to driving those country roads.
We're very pleased to have this opportunity to record here today. And Mike, who do we have with us?
We got Peggy Noe Stevens.
Peggy Noe Stevens. Such a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Good morning. I'm thrilled to be here. And of course, I'm a big fan of Shelbyville.
Yeah, we are too. Both Mike and I live here. I live in Simpsonville. He lives in Shelby County. You're in Shelbyville?
I'm in Shelby County, I'd say.
Anyway, I'm a newcomer. Mike's been here not a great long time, but we're both in love with the place. So we've got Jephthah Creed Distillery here. We've got the new Bullet Distillery out here, and they've started doing tours. And everything.
I know. It's amazing.
So yeah, we're centrally located here. I think it's a jot in each direction to get to.
I think so too. For people on the Bourbon Trail, you're a stone's throw from Louisville. Not too far from Lexington in central Kentucky. I mean, it's really ideally located.
It really is.
And this space that we're in is magnificent. Yeah. I mean, it's really wonderful accommodations.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And have that coffee shop downstairs. How nice is it in the morning to go down and enjoy that? Well, we don't spend a whole lot of time chatting up front. We like to kind of get straight to the whiskey.
I'm okay with that.
You did say something to us. You said good morning. And so we'll let everybody know this is morning. So we're actually... it's early for us. So,
well, for the record, your palate is most open before 10 a.m.
I did not know that.
Yes. So when I do tastings, I prefer always to do it in the morning before you've ruined your palate for the whole day. The worst kind of tasting I could do is probably end of the day before dinner.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess people who taste for distilleries actually know that already, right? They get into work and they do their...
Yes, I'm confident
their work in the mornings. Okay. Well, we've got something special today. So we actually brought a selection of bourbons here for you to look at. And you have chosen some bourbons to go along with some nice eats that have been brought up from downstairs at the coffee paddock and eats downstairs. Why don't you tell us what we have first?
Sure.
And we can talk about it a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, this is a great surprise to me. Not that I didn't expect whiskey today, but to have all the accoutrements of, some breakfast items is really great. And I call it the breakfast of champions.
Absolutely.
Whenever you're going to pair whiskey with some breakfast items. But the first one that, oh my gosh, how aromatic to have these English muffins with Asiago cheese and Purnell sausage, which is Purnell's a good old Kentucky family who produces Purnell sausage. It's wonderful and really savory with just a hit of spice on it. And so I think with the savoriness of the grilling of the patty and, of course, the doughiness of the English muffin, I couldn't help when I saw your selection to pick out the Baker's single barrel. It's about a 7-year-old 107 proof, so not for the faint of heart. But at the same time, you needed something to be able to stand up to it,
Right.
to the food. So feel free to take a bite of the sandwich if you like, because I always like people to actually take the big first bite of the food, and then, while you're chewing, take a little sip of that Baker's, and you'll really understand. And I'm nosing it now. When I nose this Baker's, it has such great smoky notes, which goes really well with that sausage flavor and savory notes. Yet it has a nuttiness to it, a little bit of that yeasty, nutty combination that plays so beautifully.
So when you're taking in that first sip while you're chewing on your sausage biscuit, that you want the two to marry in your mouth.
Exactly. Whenever I am doing a food pairing, my goal is to create harmony between the whiskey and the food. And so I always think about, what are the flavors of the food? What are the flavors of the whiskey? And if I can create a balance, then that's beautiful. And so with this, I think this is a complete balance.
Right. Well, we've had the Bakers before, and I'm a big fan.
We drank a couple of bourbons at my house one night. We were recording an episode, and Jim's like, we were kind of done. And he's like, let me go over there. I'm going to raid your bar, Mike, and see what you have hidden underneath your TV there. And I do. I have, I don't know, 100 bourbons probably hidden under the counter. So he went over there and pulled that out. And I was kind of shocked that you pulled it out.
Well, that bottle has created new interest in the expression, I think.
Oh, I'm thrilled, actually. And for the record, I have been a longtime fan of Booker's. And probably over the last 10 to 12 years, when I was doing work on the American Stillhouse and their Global Innovation Center and the 4th Street, I would always do a pour of the single barrel, or not the single barrel, but the Baker's, pure, because I always thought of all the small batch collection, it was kind of the unsung hero. It was one that didn't get a whole lot of notoriety, but it was a great whiskey. And I'm partial to a higher proof. So it was just right for me at 107. And when I saw that they came out with the single barrel and the new packaging, I thought home run. So I hope it's doing really well in the market, because I think it's a fabulous whiskey.
Yeah, I would like to hear back from the people down there and just see how it is doing now that they've repackaged it. Now, it is a single barrel, and the Baker's 7 means it's 7 years old.
Correct.
But they are putting the age on the neckband on these, and this is actually an 8-year, 6-month bottle, that's significantly more than 7 years.
Right.
Almost 9 years. That's a pretty old bottle of bourbon. You think what went into that, really?
Yeah, because they usually put like 7 on the back, but then label at the top. So it's interesting.
Well, Mike and I don't often pair our bourbons with food, in this way. I think the Baker's actually tastes a lot better now with the sausage biscuit.
Did you like that?
I do.
Yeah.
I really do. There are bourbons, I guess, that go better with barbecue and I think I saw you pair something with a country biscuit with some country ham on it and some apple butter. Mm-hmm. And I think it was a Knob Creek you paired with that.
Probably. Because I think Knob Creek has some apple flavor in it. So again, back to the balance. And all of the Jim Beam products to me have great wood notes and smoky notes. And so that's where that plays with barbecue and country ham and the sausage that we're having today. It's nice and hearty. It's a stand-up whiskey.
Okay. Well, Peggy, we'd like to kind of get on the Wayback Machine with you and sort of go back and talk about, your path to where you are today. Now, you're a well-known figure in the bourbon world. You were recently inducted into the Bourbon Hall of Fame. You are now an author. You're a leader with the Bourbon Women's Organization, and you've got a lot going on. But all of that started somewhere in your past. Can you kind of tell us, what brought you in this direction in your life?
Probably growing up in Kentucky. I mean, there's no secret that I was always a fan of bourbon. It was part of our lifestyle, growing up as a child and then going on to college at UK and, drinking bourbon at college football games. And, it was just part of our culture, right?
You did that back then?
I did. And you know what I'm really grateful for? That YouTube did not exist.
Yeah.
That's what I'm really grateful for. But I think, moving on, where I feel like I had my boot camp, if you will, in my career was when I was in the hotel business. And I was with Hyatt Hotels. And so I did catering, convention sales. And so we had to learn a lot about wines and whiskeys and pairings and, things of that nature. And pairings were kind of unheard of, really, but you would cook sometimes with the whiskey and the wine. And then I went to Brown-Forman for 17 years. And that's where I think my career really took off, of course, in the spirits industry. I first started with doing events around the world. Basically, I did 100 events a year, and I was part of their travel department, and back to food and bourbons and pairings. And, so all of that was very natural to me coming off hotel. And then a beautiful thing happened. The Woodford Reserve Distillery was in kind of an incubator stage, and they had asked me to be in charge of the guest services area, where Lincoln Henderson was kind enough to notice my palate. And I became a master bourbon taster at that point. So that was a real turning point. And I think because I was such a foodie, I really think those culinary descriptors and flavors just fascinated me. And I wrote a book for Woodford at the time called the Woodford Reserve Culinary Cocktail Tour. And it was when people weren't even talking about chefs and, whiskey and pairings.
When was this about?
Oh, gosh, back late 90s, early 2000s.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So not that far ago. So that was a fun book for me because I partnered with an artistic director, Julius Friedman, who's a very well-known, or who was a very well-known artist and photographer and creative director, out of Louisville, Kentucky. So that was just a really passion project for me. And then, moving on, I've managed a lot of the brand destinations like Jack Daniel's, guest services, and, some Southern Comfort. And, so it was just a surround sound experiential is where I cut my teeth.
Okay. So when you work on these brand destinations, what exactly does that mean? I mean, what does that entail?
Sure. There is a lot of planning, that goes without saying on any brand destination. And I've worked on about 30 now. And it's about the consumer, and it's about their experience, and it's about how we want to get to know them and how we want them to get to know our whiskey. So whatever brand that we work with, we kind of dissect the experience. So based on the whiskey and how it's made and the production process and the history and heritage and culture, we personify that. And we think, what are the exhibits we should be doing? What's the education component that we should be teaching people about this spirit? What's the delivery of the tasting program? How is the retail store going to be designed so that people can take their favorite pieces home with them? So I call it kind of touch points with the consumer, the devil's in the details. So the consumer can come to your facility, fall in love with you, and hopefully, be a fan of and a brand lover of your product and take it home with them.
So it's kind of crafting that experience.
Totally.
Yeah. In the software development world, we call that the user story.
Oh, okay.
But I guess, in this is kind of, you're just creating that feel, that experience that they're going through.
Yeah. And where it's really become interesting for me at this time in my career is that, 10 years ago, even consumers were satisfied with learning that, okay, you've got yeast and grains and, limestone water, and you distill it and you barrel it. Now the consumer wants to know what kind of grains. Is it a yellow number 1, number 2 corn? Is it, they want to go out in the barrel cooperage area and they want to put a barrel together, and it's so hands-on. It's so interactive.
I want to go back to those Kentucky football games. So I was going to ask you.
Are you a UK fan?
I am not. I'm a burnt orange fan.
Oh,
Hook 'em
Lord.
horns.
Oh, Lord.
I was going to ask you, do you wear red because you were born in Louisville, or do you wear blue? But you answered that for me.
I still bleed blue. And my father, just to let you know, was an avid U of L fan. He was so disappointed that I went to UK. And it was something that I wanted to do. It was a big deal for me to go there.
But
So-
the house divided thing is kind of common around here.
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's in most states. I think each state has
For
two
sure.
football teams.
For sure.
Kind of Ohio only has one football team. Michigan only has really one football team. So that's a house divided up there. Weird. They're weird up there, Jim.
I know that's my roots. So
So before that, what was your first taste of bourbon? I mean, you got the Noe name, right?
Right. And we're related, of course, to the Noe family. But at the same time, I grew up very differently because I grew up in Louisville. So we were part of what I call the city Noes versus, the distillery Noes out in Bardstown, Springfield, et cetera.
Them country people out there.
Right. And Fred and I tease each other about that. But I think that probably it was eggnog for first taste. I remember, at parties that my parents would have, because they always had people over, smelling or nosing my mom's highballs, because highballs were the thing.
Sure.
Right. So those and now they're back, which I love. I think it's great. And so, I remember that nose. I also remember just driving downtown Louisville as a little girl, going to the dentist or the doctor's office, and there would be the fermentation mash bill smell in the air. And at the time, I didn't know what that was. And then when I got into whiskey, I was like, my God, this is this aroma I've grown up with every time I drove downtown.
So when you're at those college football games, basketball, there at UK, I'm sure you went to a couple of basketball games.
More than I could count.
What'd you sip on there as a college student?
Well, of course, it was anything that was available. And if my friends had it and it was free, I drank theirs. But I'll tell you, on a really great night, it would be Maker's Mark.
Really?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Maker's Mark was really a big deal. And again, I was in the 80s.
That's pretty awesome, I think.
yeah.
So you go through the hotel industry, and how did you wind up at Brown-Forman?
I was actually headhunted, believe it or not. There was a woman, it was one of my competitors at the Brown Hotel. I was working for Hyatt. She was working for the Brown Hotel. Brown-Forman actually called her to come and create a travel department, meeting planning, event planning department. And I guess the timing wasn't right for her, or she didn't want to do it. And she said, you really need to call Peggy Stevens and see if she'd be interested, because I've been really fortunate in my life that a lot of my competitors actually become friends. And so she called me and said, hey, you're going to get a call from Brown-Forman, and if you're interested, you might want to take the interview. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, and I didn't think anything of it, really. So I went and met with a wonderful woman named Lois Matus, who interviewed me and became my boss literally for 17 years while I was there. And they hired me, and it was really exciting. I mean, that just opened the door for me.
And then Lincoln hand selects you to say, hey, I want you to be our master taster.
Well, he would come to the distillery at Woodford, of course, because that was his baby. And he would be doing tastings. And so I was guest services. So I was always the one to set it up and make sure he had everything he needed. And, I would watch and I would listen to him. But what I think we found in common more than the whiskey was we were foodies. And so we would talk culinary, and we loved food. And we had a wonderful chef in residence there, David Larson, who's still around. He was a fabulous chef. And the more we talked, I guess he recognized my palate, and the more demand for the whiskey. We needed more master tasters and people to go around and travel and talk about the spirit and taste the barrels. And so it just all fell into play.
So I did see a picture, and I think you posted it. You had bourbon at your wedding.
I did. You saw that picture.
I saw that picture.
Oh, gosh. That was a great story. And Sarah from It's Bourbon Night.
Sarah Algram.
Yes.
Right, okay. Yeah.
She was getting married, and I was on one of their shows, and she was, engaged, getting married. And she said, do you have any advice? And so I told her about drinking my bourbon. And I said, before they put your veil on, take a sip, because the picture has the veil hanging over my head and I'm trying to sneak in a sip of whiskey, before I went down the aisle because I needed it.
Need that courage.
Yeah. Liquid courage, I call it.
Now, what was that liquid courage? Do you remember?
I don't remember. Honestly, I really don't remember.
At that point, it really didn't matter. Right? Just needed.
Somebody brought it to me. It did not matter.
And you drank it right down.
I sure did.
So you.
Oh, and can I add one more thing?
Sure.
So she actually, when she got married, did an exact replica of the photo, but it was her.
Wow.
So she did the exact same photo picture.
That's awesome.
When she got married.
So back in the 80s, women in bourbon, were you one of the only women around, or were there already a lot of women there working?
As far as in the industry?
In the industry,
okay,
I guess.
or consumer. Yeah.
I guess consumer-wise, we kind of know the question of that, I think.
Okay.
But as far as in the industry, how many women were working at Brown-Forman at the time?
Well, I wouldn't have a set number, but I will tell you that very few on the upper level, in the C-suite and, executive level.
And public facing?
Sure. Public facing, 0.
Yeah.
But on, I think as the years progressed and women were coming out with their marketing degrees and moving up the ranks, and, it has greatly improved, since that period of time.
It's like a tidal wave now.
It's good. It's a good tidal wave. I still think we have a long way to go on the C-suite side, but we are definitely making progress. Definitely making progress. You see more female marketers today, great women like Jackie Zykan and, Miriam Barnes and people like that who have come into the industry and shaken it up a little bit. And I'm thrilled with that.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting, I think. We've had a number of them on, and Elizabeth McCall, we had her on as well.
I just saw her at a conference that I attended this week.
So do you think you maybe busted that door down for some of the women?
I don't know about bust, but I'd love to think that it was a catalyst. I'd love to think that I had just a small piece of that, to get things shaken up and start thinking about more women in the industry. And I guess that kind of leads me over parallel to consumers. Women were always drinking whiskey. There's no doubt. It's just, it wasn't recognized. We weren't marketed to. The marketing budgets were always about, white male, between 30, 55, that type of thing. Because I don't think that the perception in the industry was that women were drinking whiskey, but I knew better, growing up in Kentucky. And so when I started my own company, that's when I was like, it's time we have a conversation, with women. And that's where Bourbon Women came from.
Well, Mike, I think what we'd like to do here at this point is we'll just keep sipping on this this Baker's.
Fine by me.
We'll eat the rest of our biscuit.
Love
and
it.
Take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about what you have going on today.
Sure.
And some events you have planned and some other things and your new book.
Great.
All right. I'd like to thank Tommy and Gwen Mitchell from Logheads Home Center for supporting this episode of The Bourbon Road. Logheads Home Center, nestled in the hills of Kentucky, is an industry leader in building handcrafted rustic furniture. Family owned and operated, they take pride in offering only the very best for their customers. The Logheads, and that's what they like to call themselves, are skilled woodcrafters who are passionate about creating rustic furniture for people who appreciate the beauty of natural wood. Owners Tommy and Gwen don't just sell the rustic lifestyle, they live it. And you can be sure that Logheads furniture will always be handcrafted in Kentucky by artisans who embrace the simple way of life. Logheads rustic furniture is made from northern white cedar, a sustainable wood that's naturally rot and termite resistant. Its beauty and quality will add warmth to your earthy lifestyle for generations to come. Be sure to check out everything they have to offer at logheadshomecenter.com. And while you're at it, give Tommy and Gwen a shout on Facebook or Instagram at Logheads Home Center.
here at the Saddlebed Suites here in Shelbyville, Kentucky. You can hear the farm trucks rolling by us down Main Street here.
And Peggy, you have another whiskey for us, and you've got a food item to pair with it. Why don't you take it away?
Well, I will. This is Larceny Barrel Proof. And this was from your all's collection that you brought. And when I saw the pastries come up with a lot of the cherry filling, I nosed the Larceny and thought, this is it. Because this Larceny, just very aromatic. I get a big blast of cherry.
So we're continuing our Breakfast of Champions.
We are continuing the Breakfast of Champions. And then if you see, and these are some of the little details when you're thinking about food pairing, but you see some kind of almonds on the top of it. And so I get a little almond vanilla nose out of the Larceny. So I'm matching the flavors. So this was kind of a no-brainer for me. And Larceny, even though this is barrel strength, I believe, like 123 possibly.
I don't remember what the proof is on
Yeah,
this
I
one.
think it's right around
122, 123.
Yeah.
Okay, so I wasn't too far off. To me, it's still, even though it's yummy and textural and complex, it still feels light to me in a good way. So I think the pastry won't get demolished because look, there's probably about an inch of cherry filling. I wish your listeners could see that there's an inch of cherry filling in this.
Well,
So
they'll see it on our photos.
it's a big blast.
Yeah, so we actually do a written blog with every episode. So,
great.
so there'll be all these wonderful pictures to go along with it. So
Good.
if you're listening to this and you really want to see what we're eating, jump on the blog. You'll see it.
So take nose the Larceny first and see if you get that cherry that I was talking about. Sometimes people think those fruit notes come from, another area of the production process, but really there's a lot of cherry in the barrel.
There is. And I definitely, get that kind of nutty almond from a Larceny.
Right.
Yeah. From most Heaven Hill products,
Yes.
or many Heaven Hill products.
I do
anyway.
too. So I thought this would be just ideal. And there's just the smallest drizzle of a vanilla icing on top. So back to that kind of cake batter shortbread flavor that you also get in the Larceny matches perfectly.
So this looks like it might be kind of a shortbready kind of
Exactly.
thing. Yeah. So we do the same thing we did last time. We take a little bite.
Take a nice big bite, not a little bite.
A bit of nice.
I encourage everybody to take a big bite of the food to really let those flavors sink in.
So do you take a bite and you allow it to you chew it in your mouth, you enjoy the food a little bit, and then you introduce the bourbon.
Then you introduce the bourbon and let it play.
Okay.
Let it play with the food a bit.
All right. Well, let's do it.
All right.
Already did.
You're a quick study.
Yeah. This is cherry pie in a glass right here. It is just the buttery crust. I get that inside here. A little bit of cinnamon on that back end with that barrel proof.
Oh, yeah. And I have to tell you, as much cherry that is in this pastry, the Larceny brightens it even more. Notice how the cherry kind of brightens.
Oh, wow. That is amazing.
Right?
Mike, I really appreciate you tasting early like you normally do, because you allow Peggy and I
To actually do it right.
To do it right. Yeah.
no dead air while we were.
Well, Peggy, I love weeded bourbon. And when I found out that Larceny or Heaven Hill was releasing this, I was super excited. I was like, man, they're making a barrel strength bourbon for me. I'm the consumer they're trying to get, I think. And I think Maker's Mark did the same thing with their cask strength.
Mm-hmm.
They're looking at guys that drink weeded bourbons. And I love it. I love when a company's coming out with more and more weeded bourbons.
Right.
Buffalo Trace has their weeded bourbons.
Mm-hmm.
Old Forester, I'd like to see them come out with something. Maybe
I think
in the future.
Wilderness Trail.
Wilderness Trail, Pat and Shane's
Yeah,
wheat.
they're brilliant.
Their wheat. And their wheat is, I think I saw on Breaking Bourbon, they have the release calendar on Breaking. I think I saw that they announced that Pat and Shane's wheat is hitting 6 years. Is releasing a 6 year this month.
This month, yeah.
March, which is when we're going to release this episode. So
I'm super excited. Pat and Shane we love them to death.
I do too. They're brilliant. They're as nice as they could possibly be whenever you see them out. And every time I'm around them, I learn.
Two smart guys.
Every time I'm around them, I learn something, and I've been in the industry 30 years.
And they're killing it. I mean, they are killing it. I mean, they're making so many barrels a day. It's unbelievable that they were able to take a new craft distillery and just raise to that level so quickly.
So age statements. Let's talk about that for a minute, because that Baker's has an age statement on it, right? And so does the Larceny actually on the back.
Yeah, I think it said something 6 to 8 years between that.
Yeah, 8 to 9 on that bottle, I think, for that. Do you think age statements are going to go away in the future?
I think it's going to depend on the price of the bottle. That's what I think. I think that a lot of distilleries will do away with age statement just because of volume of product, and, to turn the consumer off that focus a little bit and just focus on the flavor and not necessarily the age. The Scotch industry always hung their hat on age statements, 18-year-old, 20-year-old,
right,
et cetera. But if it's a very high premium bourbon, I think that some age statements will probably remain, because a higher premium price, you have a sophisticated consumer and they want to know more detail before they buy that bottle. So that's my prediction.
Expect that, right? The reason I was saying that is because when they rebranded Baker's, they could have just did away with the age statement. And instead, Jim Beam said, no, we're going to leave that age statement on there, and we're going to even put it on the neck of the bottle. I think is, in my mind, that's maybe where the industry goes.
And I think that Baker's is remaining an upper shelf premium product. We always see Baker's up there next to the Booker's, up on top. And, now the bottle sort of tells that premium story, I think.
You could probably kill somebody with that stopper in that thing. It weighs like 7 pounds.
But, I think of two products like Elijah Craig that took the 12-year-old, off. I think Knob Creek, I don't know how many years ago, took 9 years, off. So I think you'll see some of that, but when it comes super premium, I think it's expected to know.
So do you think that because everybody has increased their production as a result of what's going on in bourbon, and some of those stocks are now coming to age, and as the pressure is off on their inventories, do you think maybe those will come back, or do you think that this is a new norm?
I think they probably may come back. I guess I focus more on the age statements of craft distilleries.
Okay.
And the reason being is I work with so many craft people in the industry, and, all of their product, they might have all started with vodkas and gins and, just to get them by, moonshine. And now some of their brown spirits are coming to fruition. So I'm more interested in reading an age statement on a craft brand.
Okay.
To decide, okay, is this really, did it pick up the flavors of the barrel like they're saying? And, that's where I focus.
Some of those craft brands out there, what craft brands do you work with right now?
Well, one of my early clients was Peerless, which has done a phenomenal job, as you know, bringing out their rye. And they even started with some moonshine, just to get started. Old Dominic. We were just talking about Alex Castle.
Yep.
That was a client. Jephthah Creed, right here in Shelbyville, was a client. So I've had Texas clients. I've had, really across the United States, which has been fun because people don't really realize the regionality of the products. In Texas, their climate is just sweltering hot.
Right.
So their warehouses, they just churn that barrel, as far as the expansion and contraction of the barrel, where we have very extreme cold here in Kentucky, very extreme hot, that's our own barrel rhythm. So it's super interesting to me.
So an 8-year-old Texas whiskey is highly unlikely, right?
Well, I think that they're going to mature quicker.
Yeah.
I just, from what I can taste.
There would be nothing in the barrel.
It's true.
Yeah.
Because of evaporation.
Yeah, I think, I'm a Texas boy, and I think people think Texas just is hot all the time, but you get in central Texas, where Balcones is, and or if you get up towards Dallas, you could get those extreme cold temperatures down into the teens quite often in the wintertime. Just a little bit different of a cold, more of a dry cold than it is wet. Kentucky cold to me is a wet cold.
Yeah.
To where down there they do that. But the summers there or hot.
I tell you what, I want to say one thing. If you're not out there pairing bourbon with sweet pastries in the morning, you're making a big mistake, because
It's a new life choice.
this is amazing.
I'm so
This is the way
glad.
to live right here.
Yeah, I'm glad.
I don't know if it's just generally good or you made a great choice, because it tastes wonderful together.
Well, I appreciate that. And, that's the important thing about food pairings. I never want it to be like the wine industry and make it intimidating to try, a particular product with a food and to say, oh, you got it wrong. You got it wrong. That's not my vibe. My vibe is to make it very approachable and fun and let you pick out the flavors and then say, gosh, what would that go great with? Because it's really exploratory. It's, just so much fun if you take your time with it. You have a party in your own home. You can have a whole food pairing party. So I want people to enjoy that.
Yeah. So we're having Larceny Barrel Proof with this cherry pastry, and it's just a wonderful combination. Are there a couple other expressions that come to mind that might pair well with a cherry pastry, like maybe Elijah Craig?
Elijah Craig, hands down, the barrel strength.
Okay.
Elijah Craig is phenomenal. It's really one of the more complex whiskeys that I've tasted in the last probably 5 years or so. I really enjoy that product because it just has layers and layers of flavors. And when Bourbon Plus magazine came out, Fred Minnick, myself, Carla Carlton, we did profiles for a little while, like what do I taste? And I had selected the barrel strength Elijah Craig. And I was like pancakes and syrup, and it just went on and on and on.
Wow. Yeah. Those are a popular expression. But the people out there, have to understand that you're going to drink something that's typically in the 130 to 140 proof range, right?
That is my take on, flavor. I tend to go, and this is where I think the Bourbon Women Association has helped the industry understand that women do go for the higher proof, more robust and spicier whiskeys. So it is typical for me to do a barrel strength. However, if it's something that you want to bring the proof down, all you need to do is to drop, a few drops of water or, however much water that you feel, you can taste the flavor a little bit better and do it to your own liking. Dropping the water in the actual whiskey brings out the fruit notes.
Okay.
So I guarantee you, if you dropped a few drops of water into the Larceny you just taste, you got immediate cherry notes. Wait till you get the cherry notes.
Right.
When you do that.
So it doesn't really have a whole lot of effect on the kind of the spicy back end, but it opens up that front end a little bit.
Opens the front end. And I also, when I'm doing seminars, I have an upcoming seminar in New Orleans in March. And when I teach people how to taste the whiskey itself, if it's a very high proof bourbon and they're not used to it, I have them take a little sip and swallow and then blow out. Just like that.
Okay.
And what that does, it blows out some of the alcohol. So you can really get the base flavors. Try it.
So while he's doing that, I got to ask you about this. Last 2 years been pretty big for you, right? You've won two just awesome awards that says a lot about your character and what you've done for the whiskey industry. What were those two awards?
Well, in 2019, the Kentucky Distillers Association did the Bourbon Hall of Fame, where they, among the peers of KDA, select several members from the bourbon community as a Hall of Fame recipient. And I can't tell you how, first of all, I was blown away when Eric Gregory, the president, called me. I thought it was a joke. I said, real? What? Because I'm not a distillery. I don't have a product, if you will, that I'm selling, but I've made contributions to the industry because I've always been passionate about innovation, and whether it was, my offering to the Kentucky Bourbon Trail strategy, whether it was culinary, whether it was the Bourbon Women Association, I do things that are passion projects.
Great.
And to have the industry recognize the passion projects, I didn't do those projects to get an award. I did them because I loved them. And so that was nirvana for me. And Bill Samuels introduced me at the awards banquet.
That's great.
And talked about our relationship, over 30 years and the things that I've done. And it was surreal to hear him speak about it. And then last week, believe it or not, I was in New York in Whiskey Magazine. So this is a 2020 award, gave me a Hall of Fame for Whiskey Magazine alongside of Frank Coleman, who also won a Hall of Fame award. And he is with Discus. He's been with the Discus Association, which is a very important association to our industry for legislation and liquor laws and all of these things that help make us go.
Right.
So to share that with him, who I've known for so long in the industry, and to be in New York and see so many people I knew. It was at the Flatiron Grill bar. It was amazing. It was amazing. So I'm feeling really, really fortunate right now.
That's really great, Peggy. And, I think to be recognized by your peers in the industry must be something that just tugs at your heart a little bit, doesn't it?
Most certainly. Because I think our industry, and I try to teach a lot of the craft people, we are an industry of relationships, and we're very protective of that. And I think it all started with the camaraderie of our master distillers many, many years ago, and how they were competitors. And I even mentioned earlier in the program, I tend to become friends, with my competitors, because that's the way it needs to be.
Well, that's that saying we always say is rising tides raise all ships, right? Your competitor reaches out to you and says, hey, I'd like to help you out, or Heaven Hill when they burnt down.
That's right.
Their competitors reached out and put that hand out. And I think it's the same way with our podcast is other podcasts. Hey, you guys are needing help. We'll help you out, or we'll come on your show. You can come on our show.
That's right.
I love that that's the bourbon culture to me.
It is the bourbon culture, and we have to keep that.
Absolutely.
The larger we get. And so again, I guess that's why I always kind of preach a little bit to craft distillers, because when I do meet craft distillers, they'll say, oh, I met so-and-so from Kentucky and so, and they were so nice and helpful. And I said, yes, because that's what we do.
Right. Yeah. There's no fear of market share there.
No.
Now in business, market share is a real thing.
Business is business.
Right.
Sure. But on a camaraderie level,
right,
and rising tide level, we have to stay together.
Absolutely.
And what about history? How do you feel about the bourbon history? So there's been latest Jim Beam commercial that came out right around the Super Bowl, showed a new digital still house, a new digital rick house, and people in the lab, and said we're turning away from our history and we're going to make ourselves new. That hurt me a little bit. I was like, wow.
Well, if you're talking about innovation, I think we have to stay tuned, because there is no doubt that some of the old ways are the best ways of production. But at the same time, if I go back to the 1800s and look at George Garvin Brown and how he brought the clear glass bottle to Old Forester.
Exactly.
Because before that time, everybody had colored glass to hide the imperfections of the whiskey. Maybe they thought at that time, George Garvin Brown's crazy.
Right.
For doing a clear bottle. We can't do that in the industry. But he did, and it made us better.
And then what about finished bourbons, are a newer thing, I think, right?
Absolutely. And so that's a great example of current innovation. I think we have to embrace it, but we have to make it authentic. And why I say that is because if we're just doing tricks for consumers, cherry flavored this and this and this, if it's just tricks and it's not a good quality, then we've done ourselves a disservice. Right. But I'm perfectly fine with a great bourbon being finished in, a cask of, sherry or something like that. It's artistry.
And it took a lot of courage for Wes and Lincoln to take that leap.
Absolutely.
Back then with Angel's Envy.
Absolutely.
Because it was not something that was done on a regular basis.
You are correct.
I think even today, we'll have friends that are like, oh, that's not a bourbon. And I'm like, have you tasted it? No, I haven't tasted it. Well, why don't you taste it first? Learn a little bit about that expression from that distillery. They're a distillery. They're pumping out some juice at that place.
But that's always the age-old tug-of-war between, somebody wanting to live in the past and somebody wanting to branch out into the future. So.
Yeah, and so that's why I always say there's room for it all.
Right.
If it's done well. If it's something that's truly not authentic and it's just a trick, a marketing trick to play to consumers, but the end product's not great, that's when we do ourselves a disservice.
Now, you had Leaper's Fork as one of your customers. And we went down there and visited them. When I think of a distiller in the 1800s, I think of Lee Kennedy and his team down there.
That's right. In fact, I ran into April Weller Cantrell, who manages all of that down there, and she was busting with excitement because their new rye is out, apparently.
Yeah.
Or coming out. And she was like, I meant to bring you bottles. And I'm like, well, there's always a second chance.
And that's a 3-year-old rye, right?
It is a 3 to 4 year old. And
Did you taste it?
They put it out there for me, and I drank a whole bunch of it. Now, they had 2 expressions. They had one at 55, and then they had one at 85. And wow, both of them, they were amazing.
Yeah.
Now, Vivian, she sat right beside me, and I was driving that night, so I kind of sipped on it. But my wife is not a whiskey drinker at all. And
I'm sorry for that.
Well, she says she isn't, but surprisingly, she
Can I have her phone number?
She drank every glass there.
I was going to say, can I have her phone number? I'll change her.
All right. So, let's talk a little bit about what you got going on now. So you are actively involved with the Bourbon Women. In fact, you are the founder of the Bourbon Women?
I was the founder of the Bourbon Women Association, but believe me, I cannot take credit because we've always had a board of some of the most dynamic women in the industry, and they lead the charge. I do what they say, basically. But we have executed over the we're coming up on our 10-year anniversary, actually. We've executed over 200 events across the nation. We're in over 10 cities. Just go to bourbonwomen.org and you can become a member and attend our annual Symposium conference in August, which 300, actually, I think we had a little over 300 women came to Louisville for, distillery excursions and culinary workshops. And we had experts from all over come in to teach grains and yeast and all of these things. It was absolutely amazing. And they came from 26 different states.
That's awesome. And you guys are very active. You got a lot going on. You're reaching out to women all over the country.
We are.
And it's very inclusive. So you guys are just looking for women who are excited about
the
bourbon.
Lifestyle.
Yeah.
It's funny. We talk about we're not a drinking club. We're a movement and we're a lifestyle. And so if you want to come and have some fun and network, and enjoy the product and get educated on the product and fall into the romance of our lifestyle, and come on over.
Right. When I think of a bourbon woman, I think of the most classy lady I've ever known, holding a Glencairn in her hand and
like I'm doing right now,
sipping on with that Southern accent, maybe that Paula Deen accent. I love it.
And so you recently released a new book. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. My new book, alongside of one of my very best friends, Susan Riegler, who has written, probably over 8 books on bourbon. And she and I are the whiskey reviewers for American Whiskey Magazine. So we have a ton of fun doing that. She and I got together, and this was a book that I actually started probably 7 years ago, wrote a few chapters, and then just got busy. But I've always wanted to write the next chapter in bourbon pairings and entertaining. And then with her knowledge alongside of me and our partnerships, we came up with, are you ready for the title? Mm-hmm. Which Fork Do I Use With My Bourbon?
That's a clever title.
It's about how to entertain in your home with bourbon, how to conduct tastings, the proper equipment that you can have, the fun you can have, decor. It talks about food pairings, menu pairings, just all types of. So I got a lot of my event planning skills in there, and Susan and I have a lot of our palate in there. So we even have a chapter on Derby. So I think the consumer, anybody who's reading it, it's for basic learners. We have an advanced chapter for really savvy whiskey people, and it's out in May before Derby. But the pre-sale right now is on Amazon.
Okay. So you can go on Amazon.com right now. You can pre-order the book.
Correct.
And then have it in your hands before Derby when you need to entertain.
That's right. Around, I think they said end of April, because for those listeners that don't know, Derby is the first Saturday in May.
So somebody gets this book at the end of April. Are there going to be some good examples in there for them to
you better believe it.
Get going?
Yes. We have cocktail recipes in there. We have food recipes. It's not a cookbook. It's really kind of a lifestyle book.
Yeah. And so how have the pre-orders been going so far?
Fabulous.
Yeah.
We're very, very pleased. In fact, I was told it's the #1 new release right now.
Oh, wow.
On Amazon. Now, could that change tomorrow? Absolutely. But I'll take that.
So if somebody doesn't get a pre-order, they don't get a book before then, and they're come into to the Derby into Louisville and somebody's wanting to pick that book up, where could they pick that book up in Louisville?
Well, I'm hoping that, they'll still be able to order it on Amazon, but hopefully the airport will be carrying it. A lot of the distillery retail, shops will be carrying it. I know that the Fraser Museum, we're doing a big book launch with the Fraser Museum come June, I believe we're scheduled for. We're doing, so they'll carry that in advance. So lots of places. Just
what about
Google
at the Derby shop there?
Yes, actually the Derby Museum. We're doing also a party with them at the Derby. Thank you for reminding me of that. We're doing a whole event, actually, Derby Week. Showcasing the book.
So our listeners out there, if you're going to the Kentucky Derby this year, 2020, and you're at the Derby, go into the museum there. They have an awesome gift shop.
They have an awesome gift shop.
Go in there and buy Peggy's book that she just wrote with Susan Regler. We had her on.
Isn't she interesting? That's why I love her. I just think Susan is just brilliant.
I was trying to dig stories out of her and her favorite bourbon, and she just wouldn't budge.
Well, she's a professional,
Absolutely.
Well, Peggy, it's been a pleasure to have you on, but I want to give you the opportunity. I mean, people want to find out more about what you have going on at any given point in time. You have a website.
I do. It's a very creative name. It's just PeggyNoeStevens.com.
There you go.
So come visit there. Come visit the Bourbon Women Association. You can find me both places.
And you're active on social media?
Absolutely. Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter.
Now, your company, Peggy Noe Stevens, what actually does that company do?
We focus more than anything on brand destination work. So like I said, we've worked on 30 distilleries. We do tasting profiles. I do a lot of sourcing of whiskey for different brands and, profiling that out for quality. I also do a lot of speaking engagements. And so people will hire us to come out and do a seminar on how to drink whiskey or how to entertain with bourbon. I've done one recently on, barrels and how they're made and how that affects flavor. So we do a lot of public speaking.
So keep your eyes out. Peggy's actually getting around. You can find her at a lot of the big events and a lot of you new young distilleries out there, new startups. Check her out. I think maybe she can help you with your customer experience there.
Thank you.
Well, Peggy, it's been a pleasure to have you on
Loved
the Bourbon
it.
Road.
Thank
I had
you.
a blast.
Tons of fun.
Good breakfast, huh?
Great breakfast. In fact, I'm going to have seconds as soon as we're off the mic.
All right. Well, thanks again for being on the Bourbon Road.
Thank you.
So you can find us at the Bourbon Road on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. You can go to our webpage, thebourbonroad.com. We have our blog on there with photos, our episodes, soon to be some retail items, I think.
Yep.
And you can find me at One Big Chief on Instagram.
I'm Jay Shannon 63. And come to our Facebook page. We have a private Facebook group on there, but we accept all interested parties. All you have to do is request to join, answer a few easy questions. We just want to make sure you're 21 and you know what you're getting yourself into. And when you come in there, it's going to be some like-minded people. We're going to hang out and chat, share pictures of bottles and stories and meet up sometimes. And we'll see y'all down the Bourbon Road. We do appreciate all of our listeners, and we'd like to thank you for taking time out of your day to hang out with us here on the Bourbon Road. We hope you enjoyed today's show, and if so, we would appreciate if you'd subscribe and rate us a 5-star with a review on iTunes. Make sure you follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at the Bourbon Road. That way you'll be kept in the loop on all the Bourbon Road happenings. You can also visit our website at thebourbonroad.com to read our blog, listen to the show, or reach out to us directly. We always welcome comments or suggestions, and if you have an idea for a particular guest or topic, be sure to let us know. And again, thanks for hanging out with us.